Since the COVID pandemic first began last year, many learner drivers have had their plans to complete their driving test turned upside down. They've had to deal with repeated cancellations, and the constant stop-start of lessons has disrupted their ability to learn to drive as effectively as usual. Tom Price says the gap in his driving lesson sessions put him at a disadvantage when it came to taking his test.
I had a test booked for April last year, but when the lockdown came in March, it was postponed until October. By the time lessons were announced that they could come back in, I ended up having about 6 lessons before the test, and I didn't feel prepared for it. I was a bit nervous, and I ended up failing that test. I rebooked the test soon after, but January was the nearest we could get for the test, as there was a massive backlog of tests. When the lockdown was announced then in December, my January test ended up being postponed until June, so I'm still waiting for that test. The major problem I have is that my theory test runs out now in July due to, obviously I passed it in 2019, so I've only got 2 years available on that. The DVLA aren't willing to extend any of the theory tests, which is a bit bad because we've lost 9, 10, 11 months of learning due to the lockdown.
If you were unfortunate enough to decide you wanted to take your driving test as COVID hit, then the even lengthier than usual process towards achieving your licence is bound to make you feel extremely stressed out. Karis Griffiths explains how frustrating it is that everything has taken so long.
It was particularly frustrating as I bought a car in January hoping to drive it by May or June and was already paying insurance for it. However, I could not drive it independently. Eventually, I got a driving test in September, but I failed due to hesitation. Luckily, I managed to rebook for October due to a cancellation. However, Shah-Neville had to go and do a local lockdown, which made me have to book a new driving test, and the date available was the start of January, which of course posed a lot of stress to me. However, I managed to find a cancellation a week and a half later. Unfortunately though, someone in my class had COVID, which meant I had to cancel my driving test. Again, I had to rebook for a driving test, and the dates were now towards the end of January, which of course made me very stressed. Luckily, I found a cancellation for November 19th and passed.
For Louise Morgan, this is her 3rd time at attempting to learn to drive and pass her test. She says the DVSA helpline were very responsive and helpful. However, when it came to her actual driving test booking, she didn't hear from them until the last minute about it being cancelled, and found it difficult not knowing exactly when her test was going to be.
Initially, I was a bit concerned because I hadn't heard from the DVSA and I wasn't really sure what was happening, but I was aware that the tests were being cancelled. So I did call them a few days before I received my cancellation and spoke to somebody who was quite helpful on the help desk. He did, however, confirm to me that he couldn't guarantee that my driving test would be rearranged. As I am moving out of the Cardiff area in a while, I wasn't too concerned about whether or not my test would be rebooked or not, because I figured I could rebook at a time that was more convenient for me. It was a bit frustrating not hearing from the DVSA until the last minute, as even though I was aware that my test would be cancelled, I was just a bit concerned about sort of what was happening. The help desk was extremely helpful though in sort of confirming that it would be cancelled.
Now that driving tests can resume in England and Wales, the DVLA has the huge task of attempting to clear the backlog of 420,000 practical tests and 380,000 theory tests, with the national average waiting time for a test now being 17 weeks.